Welcome to Let's Talk Learning Disabilities with Laurie Peterson. Laurie spends her days talking about dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, and ADHD. She talks to students and adults who have had a lifetime of academic challenges. She's here to share their stories along with other insights with you. So let's talk learning disabilities.
Hello, everybody. This is Laurie. Welcome to Let's Talk Learning Disabilities. Today, we are going to talk all things test prep and getting ready for college. So today I have Jim Wismer. He is the director of Ivy Experience, but he's also a board member for NTPA. Hi, Jim. Thank you for being here.
Hey, thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Well, so NTPA, can you tell everybody what that stands for?
Sure. So that's the National Test Prep Association. We're the largest collection of independent test prep providers in the country. What we do is we collaborate to advance the field of test prep. So that means advocating for the appropriate use and administration of standardized tests, providing ongoing professional development to our members, and then also offering professionals in the space a space to collaborate with one another.
Test prep could be any standardized test out there?
That's right. Yeah. So we focus largely in terms of just what our membership's revenue comes from, for the most part, on the SAT and ACT, but we have members who specialize in the GRE or high school admissions tests like the SSAT and IC. So our membership covers pretty much any standardized test you might be interested in. Not quite, but most of them. But most of our ongoing professional development for our membership is going to be focused on the SAT and ACT.
Why would it be important for a test prep company to be a member of the NTP?
Yeah.
NTPA, sorry.
So I would say two main reasons. One is that, we are very strong on our code of ethics in the NTPA. We have an ethics committee where, complaints can be raised and resolved that way. So test prep, for better or for worse, it's an unregulated industry. And that means that, like in any unregulated industry, you can find bad actors. Now, we are not a regulatory body. I don't mean to say that we are. But if you're looking for a provider who holds themselves to a code of ethics and invests their time and their money into their professional development in an ongoing manner, especially in this world where the SAT and ACT seem to change so frequently lately, then, that's really the value of an NTPA tutor.
That's awesome. So tell us a little bit about you and a little bit about Ivy Experience, which is obviously a member of NTPA. But how did you get started with it, and tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. So you might imagine that very few children, at 5 years old decide I want to be a test prep tutor when I grow up, right? So my first dream, equally rare among 5-year-olds, but I wanted to be a high school Latin teacher.
Really?
Yeah, that's right. I went to Notre Dame and got my master's there and taught Latin and Greek there. I was coming back to the Philadelphia area where my family is from, and I have much younger half siblings who were a junior and senior in college and working with this company, Ivy Experience, one of the founders, on their college essays and their SAT and ACT prep. I was looking for any teaching work I could find. So, my stepmom at the time told the founder, hey, these were his SAT scores. He's been teaching. He's looking for work. I started as a part-time tutor August 2015. And then I came on full-time after about a year of pounding the pavement part-time. Over those years, I started out more as a full-time tutor, but slowly accrued additional responsibilities. And these days I oversee all of our test prep and academic tutoring here at Ivy Experience.
I love that. So you've been in the actual tutoring chair working with these kids. So you've had that experience. You know what that's like, you know what's important, but now you get to oversee that. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. It's coming up on 10 years. It's hard to believe.
And is it just test prep that you guys do?
No, so we also work with students on academic tutoring. Now, sometimes that might be test prep oriented in the case of, for example, AP exams. But we'll work with students on math tutoring, English tutoring, social studies, whatever they need help with. We do mostly high school, some college, and some middle school as well.
Do you find that once you get into a session of test prep, you realize this student probably really does need some remediation, that they're struggling and have some gaps in some areas?
Yeah, I would say a common misconception that pretty much anyone in the test prep industry sees is parents calling and saying, my student needs to learn how to take the test. It needs to learn tips and tricks. And they think that, thanks to some predatory marketing campaigns from companies that won't be named over the years, that the SAT and ACT are just these, BS assessments that just test your ability to take a test. That's not really true. If you want to do really well and improve in a significant way on these tests, improving your underlying reading, writing, and math skills is the way to go.
Those are the tips and tricks.
That's it. And there are elements of taking a test that are important, especially for students who come from less traditional learning backgrounds where they're not as exposed to, high stakes testing. Of course, we're going to go over that stuff as well. But really, if you want to make genuine improvement, it's about the skills.
So if I have a student that's really that's a good reader, but struggles with comprehension, right? They have to read it 100 times before they can really digest it. So therefore, they never finish anything on time. Are there strategies that you can help them with in order to digest that a little bit faster? Is that something along the lines of what you could work on?
Exactly. When we talk about timing issues on the tests, I always approach it from two standpoints at the same time. Okay, plan A is to get faster and more efficient, build your underlying proficiencies so that you can do more in the time that you have. Plan B, though, is to run out of time for the right things. And what do I mean by that? When you're in a time standardized test, you want to run out of time for the questions that will take you the longest and that you're most likely to get wrong. And so part of the strategy, it's kind of like the lawyer thing where you say, my client is innocent, but if they were guilty, here's why you shouldn't punish them that hard, right? And we want you to finish on time. We're going to help you do that. But if you don't, here's how to make sure you get the most points in the time that you have. So making sure students can quickly identify questions that are not worth their initial investment of time is a big piece of that.
That's so smart. That's so smart. I would think for some kids that might be kind of hard to do at first, to skip.
Yeah, exactly. It can be very hard for students to do at first. And so we have various ways that we'll coach students through it. Like, for example, in the ACT reading section, the test is broken down into 4 passages. And those passages have about the same number of questions each, and they're about the same length. So you can have students drill passages in 1/4 of the time limit for that 1 out of 4 passages. Instead of having them do 4 passages within a big time limit, give them that more immediate feedback on, did you use the right amount of time on this passage?
That's smart.
And you might have students whose plan involves not necessarily finishing every question on the test, right? And if that's the case, then you adjust that time limit per passage to whatever it's going to be for their testing plan. And working with a student one-on-one, we're able to figure out what should your kind of custom timing checkpoints be, and you practice specifically for that.
I love that. So you guys take kind of a holistic approach, though, when working with kids on this whole process of transitioning and applying to colleges. What else do you guys offer in that sort of wheelhouse of getting ready for college?
Sure. So we also work with students on the process of applying. So we have a comprehensive college essay and application coaching package, and we do advising meetings with younger students as well to kind of get them set up throughout high school with course selection, extracurricular activities, and other things.
That's awesome. So essay writing is a big piece, I would imagine, for the different
Absolutely.
schools.
Yeah. And I would say it varies by school and by student situation just how impactful the essay is. It's especially impactful at more highly selective schools. And that's because every student applying has excellent grades and excellent test scores. And so those subjective factors are going to be leaned on more heavily in their holistic process. But it can matter in a lot of cases. Generally speaking, smaller schools are going to care more about those factors as well because they're not necessarily moving through the morass of applications. I know you guys work with a lot of families in Texas. They have an automatic admissions program where your essay is not going to matter at all under certain situations, right? So it's all case by case, but really, students are able in this holistic admissions process to become more than just the numbers. And it's valuable to them to be able to show that.
So when students, I get this question asked of me a lot. When students are trying to decide on what their topic, I know they get a general topic for their essay. A lot of students and a lot of parents will ask me, is that a good place for a struggling student to discuss their disability challenges? The questions are talk about a challenge you've overcome in your life or, a lesson you've learned, something very vague. Is that a good place for them to share that information, or does it not really make a difference?
Yeah, good question. So I like to think of the personal statement as the place where a student can really become a human in the application process. So you can think of this as how do you want to introduce yourself to a person who's going to make a decision about your acceptance to college? So do you want to, shake their hand and say, hi, I'm dyslexic, I'm Jim? And that's not to say that there's any shame in having these learning challenges at all. There is an additional information section on the application, which is often the more appropriate place to talk about these kinds of things. One of the situations where we do recommend students talk about it is, maybe you were diagnosed with your learning disability or diagnosed with ADHD halfway through your sophomore year of high school. And so freshman year and the first half of sophomore year, your grades are really rocky. And then you got a management plan in place for yourself where your grades suddenly are great. Your performance is really improving. College admissions officers want that context. So you tell them, I was diagnosed with ADHD in this month and started a treatment plan that really worked for me. And you can see it reflected in my transcript, right? That's the kind of thing that an admissions officer would really want to see. The personal statement is supposed to be personal. So it's possible that your struggle with the learning disability could factor into what that personal story is, but it's not necessarily where you want to go with it just because you have had that struggle.
And there are other places you can share that information.
Exactly. And some students may choose not to share it, and it's all case by case.
Right. Okay, so then let's talk about the popularness and what I think is now the dying out of the test optional schools. I know with COVID, test optional became kind of a really cool option, but I feel like schools are realizing it's not really working out so well. What are your thoughts on that? And do you see a decline in the test optional schools?
Sure. So I would say, broadly speaking, test optional as a policy that some universities have is here to stay. So in other words, too many universities see too many benefits to themselves for admitting students without test scores, and we're not going to see a wholesale change back to almost everyone requiring test scores the way it was before the pandemic. We've seen schools go back to requiring scores, and those schools have fallen largely into two categories: highly selective schools like MIT, Georgetown, much of the Ivy League, and then we've also seen many large state schools, and especially in the South. So University of Texas, we've seen the Florida state system, Georgia state system, University of Tennessee, et cetera. Ohio State recently, this spring was a big one. And so with those schools, they've decided the tests aren't optional anymore. You also have schools, test optional is a spectrum. That's what I like to say. Test optional means we'll take your application fee and process your application, whether it includes a test score or not. It does not mean you're equally well likely to get in with and without a test score. So,
that's good to know.
Yeah. Now, there are some schools that were test optional, back in the 60s, right? So
right.
Some small liberal arts schools, now for them, they really believe in test optional. They're admitting, a smaller percentage of their students with test scores. There are other schools like, for instance, the University of Alabama is over 70% admitting students with test scores. So they are test optional, absolutely. It is optional to send the test score, but it's less optional than, say, Bates, which has been test optional for decades. So
right. That makes sense.
Yeah, unfortunately, sometimes in college admissions, colleges aren't quite as transparent about what they really mean by their test optional policy. So broad advice would be to, you can contact the admissions offices at these schools and explain your situation anonymously and just say, do you think my test score would be an asset to my application or not? Because often it's going to be a nuanced decision. A test score that would help you at one school might not help you at another school. So test optional is here to stay, but I recommend students go into this planning to test by and large. The best way to kind of put that plan in place is to try both tests. And let me make this very clear, with your actual accommodations that you will qualify for. So we have students all the time who took the PSAT, but their extended time wasn't in place. And they're like, I don't think I'm going to take the SAT because the PSAT really whooped my butt, right? And it's like, well, you didn't take the version of the test that you're actually going to take. You took someone else's version of the test. So,
and that's important to know too, that you can get those on the PSAT. A lot of people don't know that.
Exactly. Yeah. And often high schools will automatically do that for you, and they'll go through the motions and get everything approved with College Board. But we've seen situations where high school counseling departments have dropped the ball on those accommodations, unfortunately. The best thing you can do as a parent is follow up with your student's counselor. If you hear the PSAT is coming up, say, hey, just want to make sure our accommodations are in place for extended time or whatever the case may be. But you try the SAT, you try the ACT or the PSAT or the pre-ACT, and then you use those scores to essentially determine which of the two tests to focus on, or if you're going to test. So there definitely are some students for whom the amount of, time, energy, stress, and money that it would take to get that score where you want it to be is not worth it, right? The juice isn't worth the squeeze. For that small percentage of students, a test optional plan up front might make sense. Now, you do have to understand the ways it limits your options, but you just have to look at the alternative. What would it actually look like to get the score that would be helpful here versus, what else can we do to boost our profile in terms of extracurricular activities and, things like that will matter in the college process. So
is that something through your college planning that you can help them sort of decide?
Yeah, absolutely. So in our advising meetings with younger students, that's a big focus of what we do. Activities have, reached increased importance in this test optional world. And I would say particularly academically oriented extracurricular activities as a way to demonstrate your academic credentials in a lack of a test score. So the reason that test scores are so valuable in college admissions is because they are the single best predictor of how well a student will do in college. And so they have a higher correlation with your freshman year GPA in college than your high school GPA does. That's because of grade inflation. Now, grade inflation has reached a point where of American students in four-year colleges and universities, 84% of them had at least an A- average in high school. So grades don't tell the whole story like they used to. That figure, by the way, was about 21% in 1966 when this data started to be tracked. So when we look at these figures, you can see that grades aren't giving colleges the information that they want anymore. Standardized test scores are the best way to verify your grades, right? Where you can say, look, I proved it on a standardized test. Standardized test scores haven't inflated over that period. SAT, they recentered their curve in the 90s, and technically the scores are higher now than they were, for instance, when a lot of our students' parents took the test. So just
that makes me feel better.
Yeah, so parents, you can add about 100 points to your score to get to where the SAT is now. But the point is that with every student in the country in a given year, the SAT tells you standardized information. And the same is true with the ACT, whereas grades change over time and they're not standardized from one school to the next.
What about dual credit courses?
Yeah, good question. Generally speaking, when we talk about the rigor of dual enrollment courses, typically I would say, a dual enrollment course is considered a rigorous course. It's considered more rigorous if you're taking the actual college course on the college campus, as opposed to a dual enrollment course that's offered at the high school. And that's because it's going to be more a true college course that you took when you take it at a college. And when you take it at a high school, it could, in some cases, be, kind of brought down a little bit to a more high school level.
Okay. So would you encourage kids if they have the ability to take it on a college campus, it's a good option. If it's going to be something that's offered on your campus, it may not give you the benefit you think it's going to give you.
Yeah. So I would say, generally speaking, AP and IB would be the gold standard for academic rigor at schools where they're offered. Because again, standardization is important in these things, and that being able to prove your performance in the class with a score on an AP or IB exam is going to be really important. Actually, the Dean of Admissions of Emory recently came out and said that they're relying on AP scores more in their admissions process to verify grades.
Interesting.
As a way to say, okay, well, you got an A in AP US history, so has every other student, from your high school whose transcript we've ever flipped through here. So did you actually get the 5 on the AP exam to back that up? Now, colleges vary in how heavily they lean on those AP scores, so that's not going to be every college, but it is an important factor.
That makes sense. So honors courses then probably don't really give a lot of weight. So if you, are taking an honors course thinking that's going to help with the rigor of your GPA.
Well, it all depends on how your school levels things. So I would say, if your goal is admission to the most selective colleges in the country, they say right on their websites, we expect you to take the most challenging courses available to you. Right. So they're not going to penalize you for not taking AP computer science if your school doesn't offer AP computer science, right? But they are expecting you to take BC calculus if that's the highest level of math that your school offers, And that's for admission to the most highly selective schools in the country. That's obviously not everyone's concern, and it shouldn't be. But generally speaking, there are levels to this. So the honors course is going to be more rigorous than the standard or accelerated course. And with course selection, the two things you want to think about are, am I challenging myself and am I setting myself up to succeed? So there are students for whom the jump from the honors to the AP would not make sense, right? So I don't mean to say everyone needs to take every AP course all the time. It's a personal decision, and something's got to give at some point for many students. They can't just be push all the time. They need to sleep, they need to eat, they need to engage in extracurricular activities that they actually enjoy, and by the way, that help them with college admissions. So I would say, generally speaking, honors is going to be a higher level than other courses they could be taking, and it's just a matter of how far you really want to be pushing in a given situation.
So would an A in an honors course look better on your transcript than a low B, high C in an AP course?
Yeah, and so that all depends on the situation. So to kind of war game it a little.
I get asked that a lot. So yeah.
So if you get maybe you just have that AP chemistry teacher who's really, really tough. Every student at your school knows it. She's a really tough grader. But then you go and you get a 4 or 5 on that AP exam. Well, then that B minus, you have the context to show it. You can even mention in the additional information section, like, hey, AP chemistry at my school is considered a very challenging course. Very few students get an A. I got a 5 on the AP exam. That shows I passed the college level certification exam at the highest level I could. I proved it. My teacher's really tough.
That's true.
But look at what I did, right? And so in that case, getting that 5 on the AP exam with a B, that would be very helpful to you, right?
Yeah.
But it's always going to be context dependent.
That makes sense. So I know that there have been some really big changes recently to the ACT. I know we saw some changes to the SAT last year, was it? But I know this year the ACT is really, can you talk a little bit about what's new with the ACT? Sure.
So this spring and through the July ACT date, the ACT has been doing a digital pilot program for the new, what they call enhanced ACT. So I'll refer to the new version of the test as the enhanced ACT. That's what ACT calls it. The new enhanced version of the ACT has a few changes. One is that it's going to be offering more time per question for students. So that's a really great quality of life increase for students, because the number one complaint we hear, I'm sure you hear it too, is that the ACT didn't give me enough time to finish. And that's even often true for students with accommodations. So more time per question. First big change. Second big change, the science section is going to be optional at registration. Now notice I didn't say the science section is going to be optional. I said the science section is going to be optional at registration. And that's because ACT doesn't get to decide what's optional. Colleges do. And until colleges come out and say what their policies are on ACT science, we can't say that it's optional. So far, Boston University has come out and said they're requiring the science section from students who submit the ACT. Interesting, because they're test optional, but if you choose to take and send the ACT, it must include science.
Interesting.
Other schools have come out and said that the science section will be truly optional to us. And more schools have come out that way. But until we see, more shoes drop about these new policies, we're not really able to say definitively you can skip the science section. The other thing is that we do tend to find, actually, just from our personal data, that ACT science is the ACT section students improve the second most quickly in. So generally, we don't want our students skipping science because it's a way to raise their score. Now, quick technical point, the ACT's composite score is the average of your 4 section scores, as it is now: English, math, reading, science. The new optional science section will be taken out of that composite score, and it's just a separate score out of 36. So, it won't improve your overall ACT score, but it will show up as a separate score that can help you in admissions where they're considering ACT science. So, starting in September, all students who take the ACT are taking the enhanced version of the ACT, and that will be offered on paper and digitally. So students can opt for digital testing or opt for paper testing. Now listen very closely. This is maybe the number one piece of advice to take from this podcast. Students should be taking the ACT on paper. And the reason for that, there are many, but I'll just go through a few. When when College Board redesigned the SAT, they designed a bespoke application. It's a very smooth interface. It has the built-in Desmos graphing calculator that students absolutely
Wow.
love and that's very useful. And students can use their own device to take the test. So for all those reasons, it leads to a very smooth user experience for students most of the time. They've had their glitches. You might have seen the headlines. But broadly speaking, that test is a well-designed digital test. ACT's digital test, they use a third-party application. So it's a little bit clunkier. And as of right now, it can only be given on school computers. So the school needs to provide the devices for students to be able to test and take the ACT. Because of that, you're running into various technical issues. We've heard of issues with students, the window not rendering properly, zooming issues and things like that. So the user interface is clunkier. The other thing is that the ACT has more of a focus on geometry than the SAT does. And we'll see how much this translates to the new version of the test or if it's something they'll change. But when they provide a geometry figure on paper and you can just mark up the existing figure, that's a time savings over a digital test where you need to redraw the same figure. So we're finding that students take longer to take the ACT digitally. The other factor there is scrolling because the ACT is still based on longer passages with a series of questions. And so students need to scroll up and down in that interface. And that leads to time, issues as well. Whereas on the paper version of the test, you just have two facing pages. Everything is in your field of view at all times.
I wonder if that's why they left more time per question, do you think? Or
it's possible, but remember, they're scaling these two tests together. So some students are taking paper and some taking digital. So you're going to get more of a relative advantage taking the paper version.
do you foresee them improving the digital version as time goes because of these exact issues?
Yeah, they've already said that they're looking for a way to make a bring your own device policy be effective the way the College Board has. So I know that they're already working on that, and I would imagine that they'll have to. I mean, the reason they're bringing out digital testing when they're bringing out digital testing is because they've been losing share to the SAT because, again, it's a sleek interface. It's on a computer for our digital natives, and it's
right.
Students prefer the experience of taking the digital SAT. The digital SAT is also a shorter test. So I think ACT will continue this kind of arms race for student share by trying to beef up their digital option. And hopefully that leads to a better testing experience for students digitally. But for now, stick to paper.
Can you take the SAT on paper still?
Good question. So short answer, no. Long answer, there is a paper version technically available via accommodations. We've never had a student qualify for it. And that includes, by the way, a student I spoke with earlier this week who gets migraines from looking at screens for too long. Did not qualify to take the SAT on paper. The only situation I've heard of it for is visual impairment for something like Braille.
Okay. So does that change the way that you test prep when you're going to a digital platform? I mean, the content's still the same, but is there something you have to do differently as far as getting kids ready for that digital? I mean, that's probably something they're used to with their day-to-day testing in school. Yeah.
So I would say, we try to have as much of students' practice as possible be in digital platforms that mimic the platform of the SAT, practice how you play, right? Simulate those testing conditions as much as you can. In terms of content that we cover, there's a much bigger focus for us on working with the Desmos graphing calculator. It's very powerful, and there are a lot of strategies students can employ with that calculator to make their lives easier. So that I would say calculator strategy has become an even bigger part. Calculator strategy is always important, but on this new version of the SAT, it's become more of a focus. But otherwise, I mean, we work with students virtually and we work with some students in person in the Philadelphia area. But because we've been working virtually all along, our sessions don't really look much different. It's just that we're screen sharing a digital platform, or are we screen sharing a PDF of what was a paper test? You know what I mean? So to us, like mechanically in sessions, not much has changed, but the relative focus in those sessions has.
That's awesome. Wow, that is some amazing information. I've already thought of people that I need to tell some of the stuff you just shared with me. I literally just had a conversation yesterday with a student who hates geometry, but thinks he should take the ACT. I did not realize the ACT was more geometry heavy. So That's an email I'm about to make. So that's such good news. That's good information to have. If anyone is interested in your services, either for test prep, tutoring, college planning, what's the best way for them to find you?
Yeah, so our contact form at myivexperience.com, myivy experience.com would be the best way to get in touch with us. If you fill out that contact form, typically I'm the person who reaches out to you unless for some reason I'm out of the office.
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure that's in the show notes. Thank you so much for taking your time today. This has been incredibly informative, and it's really good timing too, as people are kind of thinking about, we're moving into that phase of next year. We need to start thinking about SAT, ACT. We're going into our junior year, going into our sophomore year. The planning is the wheels are turning. So thank you.
Yeah. And my number one piece of advice about all of this is, we get a lot of parents who reach out to us early, and they're always like, I don't know if I'm reaching out too early. Now, like, ninth grade is way too early to do test prep. It's not too early to talk to someone about test prep. So talking to someone, getting a plan, establishing what should happen when and what a timeline is going to look like over the next couple years is always a valuable thing. It's, again, not like you should be grinding out SAT practice problems in ninth grade. That's not what I'm saying. But setting expectations for when these things are going to happen is super valuable to limit stress at home. So I really recommend, getting in touch sooner with whoever you're going to be working with to make sure that, student, parent, and pro are all on the same page.
I think that's smart. Yeah. Not waiting till after you take your first test and you're like, oh gosh, I bombed that. I'm going to need some help. Now it's like a little too, it's not too late. You still can get help, but the better you plan, the more prepared you are, the better you are likely to perform. Makes sense. So thank you. Thank you so much. Listeners, if you guys have questions, do not hesitate to reach out to Jim via his website. If you have questions for me, you can always reach me at letstalklearningdisabilities@gmail.com. Thank you for being here today. I really appreciate it. Listeners, I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for joining us today. In our show notes, you can find information about today's talk, as well as links to resources and other episodes. If you have questions about today's talk, have ideas for future episodes, or just want to stay connected, you can contact us through Diagnostic Learning Services on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. So, let's keep talking learning disabilities. This podcast is sponsored by eDiagnostic Learning. You can find more information at www.ediagnosticlearning.com.